Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Right Off the Bat podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Callan Thomas, and with me, as always, Jim Darby. Darbs, how are we doing today?
Another great day, Callan, and another great guest. A guy who probably doesn't need an introduction, but a guy who, in my opinion, for a whole decade, basically represented the brand of Major League Baseball. No doubt in my mind, he was the most popular player in the 70s, and a great career, Steve Garvey. Steve, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure.
Darbs, you're not kidding, and Steve, thanks so much for being here.
Sure.
Darbs, just to piggyback on what you said, 10-time All-Star, World Series champ with the Dodgers in 1981, the NL MVP in 1974, four-time Gold Glove winner, a Roberto Clemente Award winner, 6 200-hit seasons. I mean, and Steve, I got to admit, a big fan. Movie star good looks, So,
oh my Lord! I'm going to have you guys introduce me. When I do my speeches.
The whole package. But
at
Steve,
COVID pay, by the way, I can't afford you guys now with this big podcast.
Yeah,
but Steve, this show is I think it's going to be a little sad, but hopefully it's going to be more of a celebration. Darbs and I have been talking a lot, and the baseball world has lost an icon recently in Tommy Lasorda, and we wanted to talk to you. Obviously, you had a wonderful, great career. You also had the great experience of playing for Tommy for a long time and winning a World Series on one of his clubs, but then playing against him. When you were with San Diego. So you just have a unique, probably, perspective that is different than a lot. And so hoping you can just kind of help everybody remember Tommy and what a great man and great baseball man and great manager he was.
Well, this may be a one-question show because, Tommy obviously was bigger than life and somebody that I first met, I think it was around June 6th or 7th of 1968 out of Michigan State University. I was drafted in the first round, the secondary phase, which was mostly for college players. And I took a couple of flights from Tampa, Florida, after the wonderful Guy Wellman, who I just recently passed away last week, the great scout who scouted the Midwest and signed many, many of the great Dodger players. And he came to Tampa, we signed me. He said, we can either send you to Daytona or to Ogden, Utah, but we'd rather send you to Ogden because we've got this manager there that we think is a great, developer of young talent. And my father said, Ogden, Utah, is that up in the mountains? And he said, yeah, about, probably about 6,000 feet. And let's see, sea level, 6,000 feet, kids has got power. We're going to Ogden. So the next day, flew in, landed about 4:30, and took a cab to the Ben Lomond Hotel, the great old hotel on Main Street in Ogden. Walked in with my bags, and it's a long walk up to the desk, and I see a man and about 6, 7 guys, looked like my age. And as I got up closer, this fella turned around. He goes, "You must be Steve Garvey." And I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "Son, I'm Tom Lasorda, and your life's changed forever." And the guys were laughing. And he said, "Drop your bags. We got your keys. Come over here." And that was the beginning of a 53-year relationship with an iconic manager, obviously, an ambassador for not only baseball but the world of sports, but truly a human being that was, in two different senses, both entertaining and sincere in his belief that God put him on this earth to make a difference, and he surely did.
So you and Tommy started together even in the minors, so it just goes
right.
beyond major leagues. You guys actually came up through the Dodger system together.
Yes, and in 1968, arguably the Dodgers had the greatest draft in history. We signed Bill Buckner, Tom Paciorek, Bobby Valentine, who were at that little conclave when I walked in that day. And then Davey Lopes, Ron Say, probably 8 or 9 players in that draft that played over 8 or 9 years in the majors, which was significant. Now, fast forward 2 years later, Tommy's in Spokane, and I had made the team early in the spring of '70. Bill Buckner and I played about 3 weeks. They sent us down. Tommy picked us up at the airport, and he said, "Okay, nice little outing for you guys. We got things to work on." Took us right to the ballpark in Spokane and started throwing batting practice to us at 1:30 in the afternoon. And that's who Tommy was. So, but that Spokane team had probably 10, 11, 12 guys that played over 10 years in the majors. So the Dodger draft system was phenomenal. They've been always been known as the Dodger way to play, but also to draft. Of course, times have changed, but the minor leagues have always been a great foundation for the Dodgers, and they continue to be that way today.
When you signed with the Dodgers, Walter Alston, when you came up, was the manager. Different guy than Tommy Lasorda. I mean, Walter Alston, I remember reading his book, The Dodger Way, and just everything was just clean cut. I mean, all the way from the uniform to your haircut. I mean, that's how Walter Alston was. So now, went from Alston to Lasorda. That had to be kind of a culture shock.
Well, not so much of a culture shock, but a personality transition to. And Walt was a wonderful manager. Obviously, 23 one-year contracts, a lot of confidence in himself, or O'Malley only believed in one-year contracts. But a Hall of Fame manager, and his style was, he's 6'3" and stoic, and he'd sit on the bench and he'd watch. But if he ever called you over or called you into his office, you knew that he had spent time looking and watching, and he wanted to tell you something that was going to make you either a better player on the field or a better person off the field. But did it in a quiet way. And he only had a couple of rules: be on time, be ready to play, and get the signs. So it was very simple. But in times when that didn't happen, he'd have one of those clubhouse meetings that were dead silence because he ran the clubhouse. He had our command. Tommy, I called him the P.T. Barnum of baseball, one time in an article, and he says, "Garv, what do you mean?" I said, "Tommy, circus is arguably the greatest entertainment in the world, and P.T. Barnum was the ringmaster. He was the one that made it this way. I mean, he was bigger than life." Tommy said, "I like that, Garv. You got to come up with more things like that." I said, "Okay, I will, Tommy." But Tommy was gregarious, obviously, you guys know, outgoing. One of the true psychologists in the game of sports as a manager or head coach. He would get to know you. He would get to know your family, even if players in the organization didn't play for him. He'd single them out, knowing that maybe at some time in the near future they would be playing for him. He wanted to know what your likes were, school. Did you go to college? Do you have a girlfriend? Are you married? Where do you like to vacation? So that when the time came for him to be the mentor, that he knew how to go directly into the soul and the heart of the player. And I thought that was exceptional. Now, Bill Buckner, Bill out of Vallejo, California. Billy was more introspective. He lost his father just before he signed with the Dodgers. Tommy became kind of like a second father, as he did to most of us, and a mentor. But Billy needed an arm around him. He needed to be talked down from jumping off the cliff. Valentine, Italian, outgoing, crazy, irreverent, was sort of needed to kick him in the behind. Not too hard, because he took a special liking to Italians. I think us Irish guys were close. I always say Valentine was his favorite Italian. I was his favorite Irish guy. And Paciorek was his favorite Polish player. But anyway, Tom Paciorek, outgoing, could play Division I football and baseball like I did. So he traveled. He had been away from home. He knew how to kind of manage his life a little more. So I think Tommy put Tom Paciorek and myself in a leadership role for Valentine and Buckner, and he did that a lot. Now, I also played for Dick Williams, who is a Hall of Fame manager. I may have the record, I don't know, or tied at least, for playing for 3 Hall of Fame managers, and Dick was different. He obviously successful, very successful, an X's and O's guy, more of a taskmaster, didn't want to fool around too much with what makes you tick. His players, he wanted you to be men, wanted you to go out, wanted you to do your job, no complaining. Used his veteran players as leaders. And if the young guys needed to be talked to or needed a lesson, the older guys, like in San Diego with Goose Gossage and Nettles and myself, with this great young team of Tony Gwynn and McReynolds and all. But that was it. You could see the three different managers, three different styles, three different successes that all led to the Hall of Fame. So I do a lot of motivational speaking, and I talk about management style, about leadership. I talk about you manage things and you lead people. These three men led in different ways, but they managed the game so very, very well that when they did have enough talent that would take them into October, they helped get them there.
It's interesting. You grew up in Tampa, and yet you ended up in Michigan State playing both football and baseball. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, when you look at a guy like Tommy Lasorda and the other guys you just mentioned, Walt Alston and Dick Williams, you played for a couple of guys at Michigan State that go down, I think, in lore as great coaches. And I think that's Duffy Daugherty and the great Danny Litweiler. Do you see a comparison of coaching at that level than big league managing? Or tell us a little about your experience at Michigan State and what it was like playing for those guys.
Progression of life. I mean, we continue to learn and to grow and hopefully mature. I don't think us guys ever fully mature because we like to play games and golf and so forth. But at Michigan State, I had very good coaches in high school. And I had about 25 offers for football and baseball. I only had about 5 for both, though, because back then was the beginning of the transition to single sport athlete. And but I wanted to play both. So Auburn was football, Florida State baseball, Florida football, Miami baseball, and work your way up. But I really was tired of the heat because football in Florida in the fall is a lot of 80-degree, 90-degree nights with a lot of humidity. So you'd lose 7 or 8 pounds a game. So when I came to making a decision, our baseball coach at Chamberlain High School had played for Danny Litweiler, who was at Florida State, who made the transition to Michigan State when I was a sophomore. So I called Danny, he said, listen, as this kid's going to be drafted pretty high, which I was first round or third round, but he wants to play 2 sports. So, if you want to talk to Duffy Daugherty, you got a chance at him. So Danny's thinking, boy, it's, Midwest, tough to get a kid that's going to be drafted this high. So lo and behold, of course, my dad was a great bus driver. There was an airline strike, and Mom and I took a bus for a day and a half up to East Lansing. And we got off the bus, and Danny met us and took us on a tour, took us to the great Jennison Fieldhouse with all the trophies. And we walk inside, and Mom was pretty tough. She was an executive secretary, and she kind of ran the office. We all know who runs offices. It's not the CEO, it's the secretary. And all of a sudden around the corner comes Duffy Daugherty, the great Irishman. And he comes up and he said, Danny, is this the boy from Florida you were telling me about? And he says, yeah. He said, this is Steve Garvey, his wife Millie, and giving him a tour. And Duffy said, well, Steve, he said, we got a big school here. We got 23,000 co-eds. I guarantee you'll get a date on Friday night. So everybody laughed at my mother. And she said, Mr. Daugherty, he's here for 2 things, an education and to be the best athlete he can if you bring him here on a scholarship. And the 2 of them, we know who runs this family. But I love the campus, fell in love with the environment there, the 2 coaches. Duffy was a little more like Tommy without some of the adjectives. And Danny was just a good, solid baseball coach, very innovative, who had played 11 years in the majors. I think he had the first airless season in the outfield when he was with the Cardinals. So he was a great teacher. He was one of those rare college coaches who didn't prepare you to just win the game and the conference. He prepared you to, he thought you had potential to go into the pro ranks. So I was blessed to have, 2 exceptional coaches in college, and then to have Tommy as my first coach, Del Crandall as my second in AA, Tommy again, and then started my major league career with the beginning of 3 Hall of Famers and Walt.
Hey, Steve, we're all going through tough times right now with the quarantine and the COVID and everything. And, I think for people who really love baseball, Tommy's passing was just kind of another little gut punch through all this. And we keep getting those gut punches. But I found myself after his passing, just looking him up on the internet, and I just started cracking up, going through some of his most famous quotes. And between Tommy and Yogi, yeah, but some of the stuff he said and some of the quotes that are attributed to him, it's Tommy and Yogi Berra, the kind of the voices of baseball. What were some of your favorite things that Tommy ever said to you, or his quotes that he's known for? Because this guy just had a way of linking words together or saying stuff in a way that just, it's going to be remembered forever.
Yeah, and like I said, not only in text but in video, and like I said before, Tommy was the great entertainer. He knew his audience. I always say when I speak, the most important thing I can do is to know my audience, and I go early and the culture of a company and so forth. Tommy knew his audience, and he was able to. He was probably 70% humor and 30% motivation, but he intertwined those two to the point where he was able to capture the audience, and they took more than just one thing with them when they left that night. The entertainment value, it's like listening to Don Rickles. And when you ask me about different quotes, you can listen to Don Rickles for an hour, and he's so one after the other. You leave and you go home and you go, if you can remember two jokes, you're doing good. But Tommy was even bigger than that because he took it onto the field. And there wasn't an umpire that was immune from Tommy's wrath, or was there an opposing manager, especially in the minor leagues, that he didn't challenge or had us challenge him on the field. I got more fights that first year in Ogden than I think I was in one fight in my life. I was in 4 or 5 in Ogden that summer. But he instilled a spirit in us and a sense of a higher level of a drive to win. But he also instilled, especially when you're in rookie ball, you got about 5-6 days before the season starts. And we did 2-a-days at Ogden. And he said, I'm going to teach you about the front of your jersey, that it's the most important thing and not the back of the jersey. And he taught us about the Dodger way to play the game, about when we needed to bunt, we bunted. When we hit and run, we hit the cutoff man, all the fundamentals that great teams do. And if you look at world champions, and yes, we're in the era of a launch angle and shifts and all that, but the team that plays fundamentally the best baseball ends up winning the World Series. There may be a team that gets there, that hits a lot of 3-run home runs, but in the end, the team that can pitch and catch, they can play fundamental sound, and has that teamwork, that camaraderie. The Dodger blue, as Tommy emphasized at all times. There was no greater scene, if I can kind of segue 1 second, than spring training. Somebody said, what were your favorite times with Tommy? And I said, obviously I was with him so much on the road for Mother's and Father's Day, after day games, obviously on Sunday, and we'd go to dinner and we'd walk the streets of Chicago and New York and San Francisco. But my favorite times were in spring training after 4:35 in the afternoon. Practice had ended for maybe hour and a half, 2 hours. And Tommy would be at a field doing something, working with catchers, working when I was a third baseman for hours, fielding bunts and learning how to play the bag, or as a third baseman when I first came up, third and first. But he would have a group of guys, and he not only would he be teaching, but he would be preaching. And you don't see too many coaches like that. And I think what he did very, very well is, like I said before, not only did he know his audience, but it was carpe diem. He would seize the moment when he knew that he had these group of young men in his hand, and that teaching moment would allow them to take it and go forward in life and become better men and players.
I don't think there was anything more fun than if you were a Giants fan and being at Candlestick Park before, and it would be freezing cold, be like 7 o'clock, 7:30 on an August night with that fog coming in, and you're up there shivering, and all of a sudden here you guys come out of the right field tunnel to go across to the third base dugout like Candlestick was, and then they were just waiting for Tommy to come out. And
Oh, sure.
oh my God, the boos and the catcalls. And of course, he would come out and blow kisses to the fans. And then you guys as players, how did you react to that? That was hilarious.
Well, my picture was on a lot of post offices there in the Bay Area, so I would uh, I would either go out almost first, and kind of sneak up on the crowd. Uh, all of a sudden, I was almost across the diamond before they noticed it was me, and they would be yelling things. Or wait till Tommy was out, and I'd let him. And there was that little door with their bullpen down the first base right field line. Let him go out, and then I'd kind of do an end run, from
Around him,
the
yeah.
right field. Yeah. So, but those games were, they were iconic between the great rivalry of the Giants and Dodgers, the personalities. I mean, my early years, Willie Mays was still playing, and McCovey and those guys. So, yeah, the teams, may have been stronger. Obviously, we had a greater run until the 2000s, but the rivalry was always there. It always heated up, once we took batting practice. And Tommy was the ringleader. He stirred the clam chowder, that great clam chowder of San Francisco. And we never got into a fight. It was ironic that we had more altercations with people who would lean over the railing by our dugout. And we had a big brawl one night on helmet night where a couple of drunk guys leaned over and Reggie Smith wasn't playing. And of all guys, he was just standing there, and they started to get on him. And Reggie had somewhat of a short fuse, and all of a sudden he's climbing up and they're pulling him up, and there's a whole scramble. The game had to stop, and I'm watching this. Of course, our dear friend Jay Johnstone, who was known as quite a prankster and seemed to be around everything that happened, I see him going up the other side of the dugout and trying to go across the dugout to kind of help, kind of be from the back door, so to speak. But he had his cleats on, and it was slick on the top of the dugout, the cement.
No.
And he kept falling down. He kept trying to get up to it. He ultimately had to crawl down to the first row. And fortunately, the fans were a little nicer there. But it was never a dull moment at Candlestick Park. Very few nights that didn't have fog and wind. But to have played against Willie and both McCovey and Mays early in my career was pretty special.
So Steve, in full transparency here, I was born in the 70s in Northern California, and I learned to love baseball in the 80s being a huge Giants fan. And I went to a ton of games with my dad and my family and my grandfather, and it was just instilled in us to just, I'll say it, hate the Dodgers. And there are guys on those teams from the early mid 80s who I still have a very strong dislike for, excluding present company, of course. But the thing that always,
there's clinics for guys like you.
I know there's
Los Altos has one. I think. Yeah. Clinic for
come on over, Cal.
Wayward Giant fans.
Yeah, but what I was gonna say was, even back then, like I remember going to Candlestick and my dad, like you said, when you walk down the right field line first, okay, get ready. Here comes Tommy. We gotta boo him. And you would do it. And in the moment you would build up all of this. And it was the spirit of the rivalry. And it taught you, how to cheer for one side or the other back then. But then I remember even after the games, my dad would say, yeah, that Tommy, isn't he great? And you'd hate him in that, the nine innings in between the lines, but you could never bring yourself to stay that way with Tommy, even when he was saying stuff like, hey, Giants fans aren't going to get into heaven and all that stuff. But it was funny when he passed, a bunch of the guys I grew up with, buddies, there were times in the 80s where, the hatred was real within us, but when he passed, we were all sad. And so that's a weird thing about the rivalry, but it's also such a great thing about the rivalry that in the moment we couldn't stand him, but we all understand how important he is to the game, and we'll all miss him forever.
Well, one of the two personalities in life, excuse me, and very rare that you love to hate, especially in sports.
Another guy who it kind of reminds me a little bit about that same thing, and a guy who you played against, who total different kind of personality than Tommy, was Billy Martin. And Billy was kind of the same thing. I mean, you know, the personality was just such that you go, God, that guy is weird. I can't stand that guy. But when he passed away, you went, oh man, I'm going to miss him.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as a player too, and you're right, I didn't play for Billy, but I admired his drive. You know, they're always on the edge. Yeah. You know, Billy was a fighter, you know, like Tommy was, passion for his team winning. Didn't accept not running full speed, not going 100% on every play. He expected you to, you know, to have not only his attention, but to understand that you are a Yankee. As Tommy wanted you to understand, you're a Dodger. And like I've always said, and I've talked to the Dodger team last couple of years in spring training, when you put that jersey on, you should feel something. And what you should feel is a sense of history and a culture and an integral part of the history of the game. So that you have to respect that. You have to understand the responsibility of it. And when you do, you end up with a greater sense of history and a blessing that you played for a team that has had that history and you help perpetuate it. Now, when I went to San Diego, not much history there. And they've always said, what was it like to play in San Diego? And I said, well, to have been part of a great history and perpetuate it, then to go to San Diego and actually to help initiate their history with 84 and winning the NLCS and going to the World Series, I said was something to take a lot of pride in. And that's what franchises need. They need to continually build on history, because the game of baseball and all of us who are fans love to be a part of it, because we're also, the bottom line is, we're in the memory business. And the memories of going to, you know, the bleachers with your grandfather on Sundays or Saturday nights, you know, I always call it date night, or Friday night from work, and the different types of crowds, and Sunday's family day coming there from church. But what you do is you remember those times, you remember those moments. They're indelible. And it's the greatest currency in life. You can't sell it. You can't trade it. It's truly ours and yours. And it's the reason why we love the game so much. It's a lot like life.
On that note, Steve, I had a question for you. You said memories, and that's awesome. I was fortunate enough, and this will be a memory that I tell my grandkids about. But I had the great experience of just one time in my life sitting down at a meal with Tommy. And it was a big group. It wasn't one-on-one or anything, but you know, it was an Italian meal, and everybody also knows how much Tommy loved to eat and food. And I remember I didn't open my mouth once during this dinner. It was probably a 3-hour dinner, and Tommy just held court. It felt like a Martin Scorsese movie with the big Italian, you know, head of the family running it. And I just remember in the moment thinking to myself, this is the coolest thing ever. I gotta believe, I mean, he was holding court. What was it like as a manager? You guys probably went out to dinner all the time on the road. I mean, was he always like that? Was every dinner this like event and just gregarious storytelling? And I mean, he would take over the place, right? I mean,
and by the way, you didn't mind paying for that dinner either.
Yeah.
Luckily, I kept my mouth shut and kind of cowered away, and the check didn't find me.
The only time I remember Tommy, and Tommy was notorious, and Tommy's philosophy was, I'm coming to dinner, I'm entertaining, you're buying, right? That's just the way it was. It was okay. God bless him. Every now and then, when he didn't know whether, you know, he was going to have to chip in.
Believe me, I paid
for the check, right?
I paid for a number of those dinners. I know.
You did.
Yes,
I did. And you're proud to say you did.
Yes, I am.
There's all the stories, right?
Yes, sir.
But Tommy would get up to go to the bathroom sometimes when he sensed it was time to pay the check, and I caught him peeking around the corner a couple times. So until the final signature was there. But one quick story, you know, when you're in Ogden, you get $3 a day meal money. This was 1968, and there was a buffet in Utah called Chuckarama, and throughout Idaho, Montana, it was all you could eat for 99 cents. And every day we would go and have lunch when we were home at Chuckarama around noon, and we'd go there till 1:30, and then we'd go to the ballpark and work out. That's what you do in the minors. But on the road one time, we played, I think, Idaho Falls, and the game was over about 10:30. And we're in a bus, and really didn't have any food. And we go about a mile down the road, and we see this Chuckarama, and the lights are on. And Tommy goes, "Stop the bus." So stop the bus, and Tommy pounds on the door, and the manager comes to the door. And he said, "Yes." And Tommy said, I'm Tommy Lasorda, manager of the Ogden Dodgers. And we just played a game down here, and I got 25 guys that need to eat. And what can you do for us? The guy said, "Well, Mr. Lasorda, we're closed, but for you, I'll open up. Now, let me see what I can do." Obviously, the guy had all the food packed away. He's got to bring it out. He's called 3 or 4 of the people that work there to come in. Now they're putting food out. And Tom says, excuse me, little Tim. He says, "And by the way, I want myself and my 4 coaches to be free." What he meant was Valentine, Buckner, Pishoric, myself, and Tom. And I said, "Tommy, it's 99 cents. This guy has opened up his whole buffet for us." He said, "It's okay. We're making him probably at least $60, $70 here tonight." So, Tommy wasn't opposed to testing anybody on that. But it could be, a great Italian restaurant in Chicago, which, like you said, Jim, many a night would come into town somewhere, and it'd be 12:30, and would land at O'Hare at a private hangar. We had the Dodger plane, and there'd be 2 buses, and then there'd be a limousine. And Tommy would say, "Garv, you and Hooten and Russell, just stay on the bus." "Why? You're going with me." "So what are you going to say? No?" So the buses would leave, we'd get in the limo, and we'd go to an Italian restaurant, and we'd come in there, and there'd be 50 people waiting for us at 1:00 at night. We'd have a 6-course meal. You'd look up, it's 3:45, and "Tommy, we got to play tomorrow. It's a day game. It's Wrigley Field." God, just a minute. So he'd finish his story. We'd get back to the hotel, the Drake or one of the hotels, at 4:30. You got to get up at 8. So one day I'm there, and it's that hot, humid day at Wrigley. It had to be 92, and even the wind blowing was hot that day, and humidity. And we're there, national anthem. I feel like I'm underwater, and national, we're singing, and Tommy goes, he's right next to me. He says, "Garv, you don't look so good." I said, "I don't look so good. You kept me up until 4:30 this morning, and I had to eat the Italian food. Look at Russell. He didn't look very good. He's pale. Thank the Lord Hooten's not starting today." And he said, "Just get a couple hits and win, and you can go back to the hotel and you can sleep." "I don't want to sleep. It's one of 6 off nights we have all year long on the road. It's Chicago. It's the greatest place in the world." And they'd laugh. And invariably, I think I hit a home run that day, and Harry Carey had me on afterwards. And he said, "You got to Chicago? You love Chicago, Steve?" I said, "Yeah." Harry says, "Probably went to an Italian restaurant last night." And I said, "How did you know, Harry?"
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but these are stories, and like you said before, stories. I mean, this is a story that can lead to one and to another, and you could put on probably a 6 or 8 episodic series on Tommy of 1-hour shows. But again, he was on the pulse of keeping his players close to him, and in knowing at the times to let us go like a good jockey, and times to use the whip.
What was it like going down to Dodger Stadium in the 70s, and you walk in and you never know who you're going to run into in his office? That had to be fun.
It really was, and I always use the one week the Reds were in town, which was always huge. You guys know that Giants Dodgers historical rivalry, but from 73 to about 85 or 84, that was the great rivalry, was Dodgers Reds. And for a period of 10 years, I think 8 of the 10 years, one of us went to the World Series. It was just that kind of 12 All-Stars on the field. But so the Reds come in, and Jonathan Winters was a great Reds fan. So Tommy knew it. Always invite him in. He'd wear his Reds jacket, and of course Tommy got all over him for that. But Winters came in one time, came in a little late, probably about 6:30. Walked down, he said hello, and all of a sudden Tommy said, "Come on to my office." Jonathan goes in there, and Jonathan would do these skits. And one skit he did was the aging relief pitcher, and it's the bottom of the ninth inning, and his base is loaded, and he's one pitch away from losing. There's nobody out, and Jonathan, he talks about the little kitty, come here, kitty, and he's doing these crazy things. So all of a sudden, he's in this skit, and the clubhouse guy says, "Guys, come on in. Tommy wants you to hear Jonathan Winters. He's going crazy." So all of a sudden, Tommy's office is full. It's all of us players. We forget the time. All of a sudden, Jonathan finally throws the last pitch like this, and we're all laughing. And Bad Boy comes in. The umpires are waiting. They've already done the national anthem, and nobody's on the field. And they're going. It's 12 minutes after 7. It was supposed to start at 7:05. So we're grabbing our stuff and going out there. And I run out. I'm going past home plate, and Harry Wendelsted's there. He says, "Garv," he said, "where were you guys?" I said, "Oh, Jonathan Winters was putting on this great skit." And Harry said, "Well, somebody should have told us. We would have stayed in and went in and listened to it and just gave an excuse to play the game." But it was Rickles, it was Danny Kaye, it was Sinatra. You never knew at a homestand who was going to come in and entertain you, or at least come by, and it was just a different era.
Well, Darbs, you said it before. Lasorda was maybe the greatest and maybe the only celebrity manager, and being in LA and being in Hollywood, I think that probably helped. But I mean, I don't think there's many managers today. I'm trying to think of the equivalent of Sinatra, but that's pretty awesome. I mean, and being in that town, I mean, was there a person that Tommy didn't know?
Well, he may not have, but they wanted to know him, and it was only a matter of time. And but managers in New York, New York and LA, and even Chicago to some degree. You talk about the Yogi Berras and Stingles, and even more contemporary, Joe Torre, because of his roots there, became celebrities in their own right. Nobody, Casey had his own type of humor. That you have to go, what did he just say? Berra, Yogi had his Yogiisms. And Tommy, though, was, like we said before, and we know, would actually hold court. And very few writers ever said too much negative about Tommy. They may have questioned what he did during the game or so forth, but they knew that he made their job easier. And he surely did. And I think the one thing about Tommy, though, regardless, like we said, never met a meal he didn't like, and never disliked a writer that he knew was Italian, and an entertainer that he could bring to the ballpark to keep everything light.
He didn't make it rough on reporters, except for the one guy who asked him about Dave Kingman's performance in hitting 3 home runs.
Well, it was Mother's Day, and he had to be at the Century Plaza at 6:00 that night because he was going to be there, and he was going to honor his mother. Mother had flown in. We start this day game, and we have a nice lead. Kingman hits a 2-run homer, get up again, 3-run homer. Finally, it's that was the 9th inning that tied it. Then we actually go to 15 innings. Top of the 15th, Kingman hits his 3rd home run. I think he must have had 7 or 8 RBIs. And Tommy's, look at his wife now. It's 5:30 almost. One of the longest day games ever at Dodger Stadium. And he gets into his clubhouse, his room there, and the first question is, "What do you think of Kingman's performance?" And of course, that's the classic video. That's since Tommy passed away, it's kind of been going around, and there's a lot of bleeps in it. But and if you're around Tommy a lot, you knew you got to be careful. You got to ask the right question, especially after a loss or a tough game. So
yeah. Oh, that to me, I mean, I heard that video back in the day when it first came out, And I was laughing then, and I'm laughing now because, if you think about it, his response was right. I mean, what do you mean? What do I think about his performance? He blankety blank beat us. So,
Yeah, yeah. And Kingman, Kingman had, talk about, people have asked me, do you have a launch angle? Of course I had a launch angle. When I got under a ball, I was a line drive hitter, as you know, and, 8 of my 10 biggest hits were center and right. But if I'd get under it a little bit, going left or really get down on it, get the backspin in it. But Kingman had this, launch angle. And that's why he hit so many home runs, didn't hit for much average, but had great power.
Well, he did moonshots. So,
oh, they were. Didn't he hit the top of the dome in Houston, places like that? But yeah, and there were certain guys like Kurt Bavacqua that tweaked Tommy, and that became a verbal, war.
Do you recall any time when you would, like a timeout, Tommy comes to the mound, and the infield gathers around, that it ever became funny? Like he would come out and say something that you'd go, "Are you kidding me?" I mean, that always had to be funny up there with him on the mound.
Well, you remember when nobody put their glove up to their face and tried to hide their talking, right? I think that's ridiculous. I mean, of course, unless you're Houston and you have cameras on them, something like that. But Tommy would come up, and early in my career, even in Ogden and Spokane, I'd go to the mound maybe the first time, the season, and Tommy would go into one of his looking down mini rants at the pitcher, to shake him up, to get him out of whether he was down on himself or whatever, and my virgin ears would be burning, and I, more importantly, not really, but more importantly, I realized nothing anybody can say that's going to change his mind when he's out there. So one day when Fernando came up, and that 81 when he was phenomenal, but probably his 7th or 8th game he was struggling, and Tommy goes out there, and he looks at me, and he goes, and I shake my head. He gives me this, "Come over here." No. So I figured, oh Lord, I go over there, and now he's talking in Spanish to Fernando, and he said, "Why don't you come over here?" I said, "I don't come over here. Didn't you realize all these years I don't come to the mound? I'm not going to run all the way over and all the way back, waste my energy. You're not going to listen to me." He goes, "Well, that's true, And I said, "By the way, Fernando knows English. I don't know why you're talking in Spanish to him. This is all, a front, because he doesn't want to deal with the press in English." Because if you remember, Jaime Ureen, the great Hall of Fame announcer and phenomenal, Vince Scully of Hispanic radio and vice versa, would be at the press conferences answering for Fernando. And Tommy looked at me and he started to laugh. And but that was Tommy. I mean, the years he managed in the Dominican Republic, where I played twice, he would do the same thing for dinners. Would play a Sunday afternoon game at Estadio Quisqueya, and that'd be one of the wealthy families would have the team over, and Tommy would entertain them in Spanish with his stories. So somebody said one day, he said, I said to the general manager of the team, Manchin Pichardo, I said, "Manchin," I said, "how good is his Spanish?" He said, "He's not too bad. He no conjugate very well, but he's not too bad." And I said, you can understand it? Yeah, we can understand it. So not only was Tommy bilingual, trilingual, Italian, Spanish and English, but he was truly international, so that even on the road in Santo Domingo, we never had to pay for a meal there either. So.
No, he was. I mean, he covered all the gamuts. He really did. I mean, he was an amazing guy, and you were so really fortunate. Well, he was fortunate that you look at the team the Dodgers built. The O'Malleys and like you said, Wellman, the scouting system, and then having Walter Alston and Tommy then replace him as manager. I mean, that was really like family, wasn't it?
Well, it was, and I think the O'Malleys, beginning with Walter, and of course Peter and Terry Seidler, the daughter, and the great core of leadership, always emphasized. But you got to remember, this all started back in Brooklyn, and when Reese first came up, and Hodges and Furlow and Snyder and those guys. I mean, rarely did they leave Brooklyn in the off season. I mean, they lived there. I mean, they got jobs. They had to have jobs. They got 8,000 a year, 10,000 a year. So they got jobs in New York. They lived in the borough. The families had dinner 3 or 4 times a week together, and that built that Dodger family camaraderie that carried into Los Angeles and became a theme. And Tommy was kind of a, the constant thread that kept that in front of everybody, and new players coming in, or players there, or players at the end of their career, to carry that torch. If you've been a Dodger, to realize that in sports, especially baseball, where you're together so much, you start in mid-February and God willing till the end of October, and there's 162 games normally in spring training, that you're together a lot. So you have to consider yourself a family. Are there problems? Are there going to be differences? From things done on the field and off the field? Absolutely. When it's all said and done, Tommy would emphasize, let's address the problem, hash it out, yell and scream at each other, and let's move on from there and put it behind us. So that was the whole key. And that's what I think was a great reason why the success of the team over the years. And the young guys, you try to instill that now with this generation.
So Steve, you grew up a Dodger. You grew up with Tommy, but we alluded to it earlier. You end up getting a great free agent deal with San Diego and go down the freeway. Tommy had taken such an interest in you, like you said, and all his players, and getting to know him and what made them tick. What was it like for you then to change and play for the Padres and then come back and face Tommy on the other side with the relationship you had with him?
Well, my 6-year contract had ended. Davey Lopes had, all our contracts were starting to expire. That was the great thing about that golden era, is Al Campanis had basically locked us up for 5 or 6 years. We were together 10 years, but when you're young, you have no real options. But by the time everybody had started to get into their talent run, the team was winning, he locked us up until basically 82. And then for the first time in Dodger history, they used an attorney to negotiate. It wasn't Al Campanis, the GM. And of course, Tommy wanted me to stay, but Al didn't really have the final say. And I'll remember it was, it was almost 9 o'clock. And then you had to sign by a certain time in November, I think November 15th. And if not, you're a free agent, which was irreparable. You couldn't go back and sign, which was archaic early free agency. 5 teams could then draft you to negotiate with you. But all I wanted was 5-year contract for parity. And I never thought it would be a difficult thing to do. And it turned out to be a difficult thing to do. And I always say, and kiddingly, and sadly, they made me an offer I could refuse, because I knew what parity was for Schmidt and Brett and these guys. And it was far less. And, I became a free agent. I go to San Francisco. Bob Lurie, great owner, but Candlestick was still there, and I thought that might be a little tough every night. Although when I played there, my philosophy was, and I didn't wear a long sleeve, same for everybody, just go out and play hard, forget about the cold, and run hard in and out. But then the Cubs had drafted me. Great discussions. I actually thought I was going to be a Cub. The president jumped in. I don't know why. Negotiations stopped. So Jerry Kapstein, my agent, and I moved to New York. Talked with Steinbrenner. Steinbrenner had 3 American League guys he wanted to draft. Jerry said, well, what about Garrett to Garvey at first? Great theme. And George said, that's great. He said, but I couldn't put Mattingly maybe in outfield. He said, but we'll talk. He said, at the very least, I'll bump it up. I'll tell the press the numbers that you want, that we're negotiating for. So then I went to Houston, not going to play in the Dome, came back, and Ray Kroc and I sat down. He didn't want Jerry, or he didn't want his son-in-law, Ballard Smith. He wanted he and I to just talk. So I met with him at his rooftop home on the cliffs of La Jolla. You could see LA one direction, Mexico the other. Came into his big room, all glass, big desk. He's sitting there with a little golf hat. And he said, Stevie, sit down. I said, yes, sir. He said, I want you to be a Padre. And I said, well, thank you, sir. You want to be wanted. He said, well, I think it's much off the field, too. I know what you do in the community, how committed you are to helping people in charities. We need that here. We need somebody with a sense of history. We want you to really start that here. And I said, yes, sir. I'm wide-eyed. He said, but I got a problem. And I said, yes, sir. He says, I can only pay you in Big Macs and French fries. And we laughed, and he looked at me, and he gave that steely-eyed look that great businessmen have. And he said, I can find a few dollars too. He said, I'm going to call Ballard. You call Jerry. Let's have a meet this afternoon. I want it done by tomorrow. And it was done by noon the next day. And I became a Padre. So Ray Kroc, in his inimitable way, enforced to me that he had a commitment to winning. They didn't have a lot of money, no matter whether you're on of McDonald's or not, but they were very creative in coming up with ways to be able to pay what I thought was parity.
Well, they were smart enough to get good veterans, you, Goose, Nettles, like you said, and tie them around some young talent that was coming up, like Dravecki, Templeton, guys like that. And
Tony Gwynn.
Tony Gwynn, McReynolds.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden in '84, kaboom. But I read you were the linchpin on that, though. That McKeon said the key to this was Steve Garvey, getting him on this team. So
well, and I have talked to Jack, and Jack's a really interesting man. He's been successful in the front office, on the field, great baseball man, but very intuitive. And he knew long before, in this millennial now, you need the one player that is your anchor in the franchise, the one player that fans can engage in, you can build around, and you got to lock them up for now a long period of time. And he knew, with my history, with my visibility, and also I knew what to do. I knew my role. And we didn't have Goose and Greg that year. The next year we did. And we started off, I think, 10-2 and just rolled into the playoffs and so forth. But he was so intuitive in knowing not only talent on the field, but what these players with experience understood. And who better than guys from the Yankees and Dodgers?
Yeah. And how did it feel for you hitting that home run off Lee Smith to put him into the World Series?
Well, again, they tell me stories of how the bars were rocking in Chicago. This was going to be it, the Cubby Bear, the Billy Goat Bar, and this and that. And I hit the home run, and they were all vacant in 5 minutes. That was it. And of course, I became, the hated guy,
the villain.
Everybody said, we're going to beat the Tigers and finally a world championship. And really, that was only game 4, but it was the biggest game of my career, simply because not only was it a walk-off, but how it affected the fans and the Padre fans, and how it put somewhat of an exclamation on the commitment that the Padres made with Ray Kroc and Jack and Ballard and everybody. And that even though we weren't at the World Series, we had won a significant playoff game that had never been done before. And then to go to the World Series was icing on the cake. As you remember, Tigers were a phenomenal team, and they had been rested for a week, and the rest was history.
No, that was their year. I mean, they were darn good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, hey, Steve, I want to thank you so much. I've had a smile on my face for the last hour just hearing your stories and remembering Tommy, and you've been very generous with your time. So I want to say thanks very much for coming on the show with Darbs and I, and we want to wish you all the best. And again, thank you so much, and we're all going to remember Tommy a little bit more from this. So thanks so much for today.
Thank you so much, guys. It's an honor to have you. As you know, I'm a big fan. May you have hundreds of these. One other thing, I'm chairman of Fans for the Cure, which is Prostate Cancer Foundation. I'm a survivor. I had a radical prostatectomy 5 years ago. Ed Randall, noted sports personality in New York, started this about 12 years ago. We're the preeminent awareness foundation. So anybody watching, if you go to fansforthecure.com, take a look at what we're doing. We're saving men's lives. We're getting them to talk about prostate cancer, getting them engaged, making sure we all take our PSA. I hope you guys do. And again, it's a chance for me to get back from this wonderful life that I have in ways of, and other charities too, but this one's the closest to home right now.
And what's it again, Steve? Fans for a Cure?
Fans for the Cure.
Okay.
.com. And if you go online, we're doing some phenomenal things right now. The number of men's lives we save every year just because we create the awareness. We have a women's group that we do Zooms with, because we all know who drives us to the doctors and who talks to the doctor. And ultimately, we have one question, like I had after Candace took me that day with Mark Litwin, who's the chair of urology at UCLA. And she asked all these questions. And I looked at Mark. I said, Mark, what would you do? And he said, Steve, I'm 55 at the top of my game. Let's take it out. And I said, that sounds like the great managers I had in baseball.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Put me in the starting lineup.
Good. Well, hey, listen, we appreciate you, Steve. Class act as always, my friend. And that's a great message, too. So thank you again so much for coming on with us.
Amen. God bless. Have a great 21.
All right.
You too.
Thank you. Well, that wraps another great show, Darbs. Garvey was awesome. Hearing all the stories of Lasorda. Man, like I said, just brings a smile to my face, and just hopefully just the small tribute that we were able to do to such a great man was awesome. So hope you had fun today. What were your thoughts on that show?
Oh, I thought it was terrific. I mean, how many more hours could we go talking about, that era, Lasorda, and we really didn't touch much on Steve's career. So, I mean, we could do another show just with Steve talking about that. So, Callan, it was terrific.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And for all our listeners out there, thank you so much for your support. Right off the bat is an Easton original production. The show is produced by Connor McGlynn. Again, another great guest today, and Steve Garvey. Darbs, we've been racking up the guests. It's been a lot of fun. But for all you out there, make sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you download and get your listening podcasts for your listening pleasure. Thanks so much, and we'll be back soon to talk some more baseball and have some fun. Thanks, everybody.
So long.